very, were somewhat cooperative. The thing with Harris only died in 1988. Now that's not that long ago when you're talking about people who like you or don't like you and so on. And nobody was neutral on Charlie Harris. You know, you either really liked him or you hated him. And because he was a lethal figure. And Harris, there were those who said, well, Charlie still got friends here. And you know, I would love to talk to you about Harris, but I'm afraid, you know, that there's still people here who have a loyalty to Harris after all these years and so on. I never had that with the Shelton book or any other book, but I did a little bit with the Harris book. But anyway, in trying to get a real inside source on Harris, I had known in doing the Shelton book. See, Harris comes into the last part of the Shelton book, for those who have read the Shelton book, because Harris was tied to, in one way, shape, or form or another, the murders of the brothers one by one. And so I had always noticed the name of this teenage gal who was sometimes riding around with Harris, and she was mentioned a lot. She was in his company when things happened. And her name was Beatrice Bell in Wayne County. And she was Harris's niece. And I just wondered about her. I thought that, I also had known that when Harris got out of prison for the last time, one of the stipulations was that he could no longer live in Illinois. He was an old man. And he went out and spent his last years living with his niece, who was then living in Kansas. Well, I knew that this could be, for me, the person, if I could find her, and if I could get her to cooperate, this again would be my inside person on the Black Charlie book and so on, because I needed somebody like that. And you know, people in Wayne County had said that she had been his favorite person in the world, and he had you know, she was the daughter of Charlie's sister Mabel, and that Charlie had taken a liking to her immediately when she was about 10 years old. And that Charlie was like her father, because her real father wasn't around. And so they would say, you know, that nobody was closer to Charlie Harris than her. And so anyway, I was able to ascertain that she lived in, or she had lived in Elkhart, Kansas. And for those of you who know Kansas, that's in the extreme southwestern corner of Kansas, where Kansas meets Colorado and Oklahoma. The town's called Elkhart, and I couldn't figure out what her, if she was still living, and two, what her name now was, and three, if it was possible to contact her. And so anyway, I only went so far myself and just couldn't go beyond that. But I turned the situation over to a friend of mine. When I do these books, I have a lot of help, and a lot of people want to be involved. Some want to be identified, some don't want to be identified. But in Springfield, one of my friends is a detective, and I gave him the situation. I said, see what you can do about her. And Bill, Bill Clutter, came back, and after I had gone a month of making no headway, he came back in 2 days and said, here she is, this is her name, she's very prominent, she's reinvented herself, and this is her address, I've got everything but her phone number because it's unlisted. But here's the phone number of her best friend. So I made contact with her. I was able to get a phone conversation with her, and she said, well, I've never talked to anybody about Uncle Charlie. And she said he was the dearest person in the world to me. She said he did everything for me. And she said I just don't know. She said I have 4 children, and I'm going to talk to each of them to see if I should talk to you about Uncle Charlie. And but she did say this. She said, I want you to know I have your Shelton book. and she said you were very fair to Uncle Charlie. And she said you pointed out that he wasn't old man, that he had good points. That's what she said. Uncle Charlie was very good in some ways and not so good in other ways. Okay. So anyway, she pulled her children and we were on the phone together in a week. And she said, well, 3 of my 4 kids said, I should talk to you. They said, Mom, get it off your chest. You know, you want to talk about it, and maybe this is the guy to do it with, or the person. One of her 4 kids said, don't talk to me. And that person's a deputy sheriff in Austin, Texas. But anyway, she said, it was 3 to 1. So she said, here's the deal. She said, I want to see you. She said, I want to size you up personally. And she said, I want you to come out here to Elkhart, Kansas. And she said, I want you to come alone. You bring nobody with you. And she gave me a time and a place to meet. And this is no joke. In a cafe by the Hotel Rancho Motel. I was to get a room. I had no idea what the El Rancho Motel was, you know. But anyway, I thought this could be it. If I convince her to talk, I may be in the Clover on Harris. So, you know, I had to get there. I had to fly from St. Louis to Dallas. Then I had to fly from Dallas to Amarillo. Then in Amarillo, I had to rent a car and drive about 160 miles to get to Elkhart, Kansas. It's really remote. But at the appointed hour, I was in this cafe, and in she walked. And we sat for about 2 hours, and she decided. She said, "I'm gonna talk to Uncle Charlie." I spent the next 3 days with her every hour. We went out to her house, and when I left there after 3 days, I mean, I had more on Black Charlie Harris than I ever dreamed. I mean, it was just, and I was like floating on a cloud because I knew I had a book then. I had a lot of work to do, but I knew then I had a book, you know. And she was actually quite fascinating. She was actually like, she had become a successful businesswoman. She was Chamber of Commerce Woman of the Year. She was a civic leader. She lived in the middle of a 53-acre tract in the Cimarron grassland area. She had bought the land before the feds made it a formal grassland. We could walk about 2 blocks north of her house, and there went the famous Santa Fe Trail. Went right down there. In fact, she even ended up taking a picture of me standing on the Santa Fe Trail. I'll say that. But we got along great. And even when we started, she said, no pictures. I don't want my picture in the book. And she said, and I don't want my house pictured in the book. But she did go along with the fact that, but eventually after my third and last day with her, she had a number of pictures laid out, and one of those pictures is on the cover of the book Dapper and Deadly. It was taken, as a posed picture taken by Harris when he was a young guy in Arizona, 2 weeks before he stabbed a cop in Phoenix and put in 14 years in a state prison in Arizona. That was his first prison term. But anyway, it was interesting about her house. I mean, it was just it was a converted church, and it was still all open. It was like a Western museum. She had collected all sorts of things from the Santa Fe Trail, cavalry belt buckles and canteens and Indian arrowheads and all sorts of stuff. It was incredible, like a museum. And and above the altar, there was like a loft that had been built. And guess who built that loft? Black Charlie Harris. Because Black Charlie was, besides being a farmer, he was a carpenter. And he built that loft for her. But anyway, it was very interesting. She had one thing of it. We walked around her property, and this is really interesting. She had back on the property this big, cumbersome jail cell door. And naturally, I said, you know, what is that? She says, oh, that's from the Wayne County Jail in Illinois. No, she did not. She said, but I can't tell you how I got it. But anyway, but what I'm trying to say, she was really good. Her name in canvas was Beatrice Riley. She's very heavy in the Dapper and Deadly book, and she was prepared for the fact that the book would bring out her famous uncle. She said that when Charlie spent his last 5 or 6 years living out there with her, of course, by then he was harmless and all that. He was pushing 90 years old, and she said he was viewed as kind of a cuddly grandpa type. He went every day to the senior center and kind of flirted with the other old gals. She said nobody had any idea what they were dealing with. But anyway, then to make it complete, then when I got back then. I had a lot of work to do. One, the FBI has a file ethic on Harris in which they really come down hard on him. Well, he was at one point #1 on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, and they have, and when he went on the lam, he went on the list when the FBI got involved because local and state authorities couldn't get him. He was moving around the United States, and the FBI finally cornered him and got him. But after he went after he became the #1 person on the most wanted list. But anyway, she made the book, and that really, I knew I had a book. But as I said, I had to get the FBI file, which the FBI did provide for me out of Washington, and it was very fascinating. All the reports every day as they're trying to track him around and all this, and all the false leads and so on. One day they'd find a body. They found a body floating in the Mississippi by Alton, and thought it was him, but then of course it wasn't him. Another time